Tackling your finances is one of every gym owner's biggest challenges. So we brought on Billy Hoffacker, gym owner and financial coach and expert, to help us break down the secrets to healthy profit margins. Welcome to Naamly University Online. I'm Elias Scar. Billy, thanks so much for coming on, man. When we had the subject line come up of creating profit margins and looking at everything financial when it came to being a gym owner, to being a business owner and an entrepreneur, there was one name that came to mind, and it was your name. So excited to have you on for this interview. Can you share a little bit of the details of how you help entrepreneurs, specifically when it comes to financials, profit margins, things like that?
Absolutely. I'll just say that when I was asked, I was so honored to share. I couldn't sleep last night. I'm super pumped. This is going to be a great conversation. As far as what I do to help people, without getting too much into the backstory, I had this, I'll say, traumatic experience that was my wake-up call when it came to finance. It involved a muscular, bald, scary-looking guy with tattoos and piercings everywhere on my stoop at 7 a.m. when he came to repossess my car. That was 14 years ago. That was my first financial awakening. From that point,
Wow.
I made some different decisions, quite a bit of a turnaround, both personally and professionally. We can get into either now or a different time. That combined with my experience as a gym owner, I've owned multiple facilities. I'm currently a facility owner. I've merged those two areas, and now I use that to help other fitness professionals and gym owners. And what I do specifically, if I could try to sum it up, because there's quite a bit to this money thing, I help them get clarity over their finances, and I help them use their business as a vehicle to achieve their personal financial goals, developing wealth, paying down debt, whatever it is for that individual. I help people with all types of financial goals. And I am one of the lucky ones. I get up excited about what I'm going to do. Just like fitness professionals, we get to help people become better. Finances is very much like that. And in some ways, I'm more passionate about it. If I'm honest, I do love both. They're like, try to choose between two different kids. But it's just really awesome to see some of those lights go off. It's definitely comes with its challenges, just like any other profession, but it's really a blessing to be able to do.
I love that. I think that's a good sum up of that passion of helping people get, you look at mental health, you look at physical health, and then financial health is really that other piece that really gives people a sense of security, a sense of peace, a sense of success. I do think you wrapped it up well. And I think your value proposition of I help keep the scary people from showing up on your doorstep to take your stuff. That's great. I like that as a pitch. So
Nice.
let's get into into some of the idea of just in talking profit margins. Everybody's heard that phrase before. Everybody's heard profit margin, and that, how much money am I making versus how much money is I'm spending is probably oversimplified. What do you think are some of the misconceptions about profit margins? How do you think, is there a viewpoint mistake or a paradigm shift that you have to take people through to look at things a little bit differently?
Wow. Just so the audience knows, none of this was really prepped. This is an actual conversation. And the reason I'm saying that is because as soon as those words came out of your mouth, there is one idea that jumped out to me way more than any others. That is, and I know we're talking about profit margin, so I'm not trying to get away from that, but not understanding the difference between profit margin and cash flow, I believe, is one of the reasons why gym owners struggle so much. Profit, as you said, is everything that comes in. We subtract everything that goes out in terms of business expenses, and we are left with a number. If you have a P&L, which you should, by the way, that might be another answer to that question of the things we get off is we don't pay attention to these numbers, which is a fatal mistake. There's a number at the very bottom of that statement, and that is your profit or loss, hence profit or loss statement. And that's your profit, and that's going to determine your profit margin. That's going to be based on a percentage of your revenue. And then we have cash flow, which is a different story. That's essentially, to use your word, oversimplification. That's how much cash you have on hand. Those are different. Sometimes gym owners will say, I was profitable. My accountant My CPA, my bookkeeper, they told me I was profitable, but I have no money. I don't understand. And that's a huge misconception for people.
What do you think? So in making that sort of mindset of understanding, there's a big difference between cash flow and profit margin, and really looking at, okay, how do I clearly understand my numbers? Like I could understand, I believe that's what I'm hearing is that step number one. You really have to understand what the numbers mean, what the terms mean, and know what you're looking at before we can make changes.
Yes, that's one of the first things I want to do with people is give them some clarity. I believe either for everybody or at least for most people, that's the root of their struggles of clarity. It's hard to fix something or improve something. We've all heard the quotes. I think it was Peter Drucker, what gets measured improves. If we don't have a true ability to measure it, we don't know what we're looking at, we don't know what it means, it's going to be really hard to improve. So yes, we want to get some clarity over that. And yeah, I think a basic understanding of some of these basic accounting terms is good. With that said, another misconception is that I have to have this huge finance background to get this right. Not
Mm,
true. There are so many successful business owners and folks that are successful financially that don't have financial backgrounds. And I have clients that have financial backgrounds and they came to me because they need help. Just having that knowledge is one thing, and it's applying that knowledge just like fitness. It's one thing is knowing it, it's another to do it.
yeah.
You need both. You need the knowledge, and then you need the follow through behavior.
So with that mind and talking about behavior and that follow up and applying that knowledge, what would you say are let's say the top three things that are easiest
Yeah.
to implement? What could somebody do watching this video and go apply right away? What's the easiest thing to adopt? The first easy changes to make?
It's tough because it's going to depend on the person. I'll give you sort of a general answer, and then of course we would look at that person's unique situation and decide what are the best steps for them. But these are some common steps for people,
Okay.
and I also struggle to call them easy. And the reason I say that is I agree with that. Yes, we want to dumb it down and do the simplest thing. With that said, like anything else that's worthwhile, it's not always going to be easy. I might say, and I'll get more clear on this, but I might say, hey, do this. And yeah, it sounds easy, but you still have to fit it in with all the other responsibilities that you have. That's one of the things I hear from fitness professionals, gym owners. I have to do the marketing. I have to develop the staff. I have to sometimes deliver the product. And how am I going to find time for the finances? Here's what I'll say. You don't have time not to do it. If you walk away from this conversation with nothing other than if I want to reach anywhere near my potential, if I want to live that big, beautiful life that I desire, I must do this work. With that said, yes, let's talk about some simpler things. Lots of gym owners are not separating their personal finances from their business finances. That is a simple fix. We want to make sure that you are paying for business things with your business account and you're paying for personal things with your personal account. I said, as I started the answer, it depends on the situation. That's a whole spectrum. Some people don't even have a business account. Some people have the business account, but they're still co-mingling to a certain extent. Others are doing that less so. So that exact step is going to depend on the person's unique situation, but that's one of them. Another that I don't think I planned on saying, but it's in my head and I can't not say it, and that is to get some good professional help. That's going to be true for anybody who's in business, who's serious about it. You're going to want to outsource your bookkeeping. Maybe let's say, I want to say 100% of the time. There might be some cases where it doesn't make sense, but I would say, I want to say 100% of the time you want to outsource your bookkeeping. That's going to give you a good look at what has happened. Sometimes I call that the rear view mirror. It's what's behind us. We want to understand that. One thing we know about life and growth and business, what happened yesterday matters. Oftentimes, that's what dictates the future. We need to either learn from that change it or not, but we want to make sure we understand what's happening and behind us. And that's what happened with good bookkeeping. That's a super duper common mistake with gym owners. Very few of them have good bookkeeping. That was two. You asked for three. Another one that comes to mind, I'll give you four, is not budgeting for your business. And what that means, it's not a scary word. I don't want to budget because I'm going to freak out over the money I have or don't have, and I don't know what to do with it. By avoiding it, you're making things more difficult. That's what I found. I shared the story about the car repossession. That led to me discovering I had $130,000 of debt, of non-mortgage debt. When I ignored it, the problem got greater. When I started addressing the issue, when I put it on paper, when I looked at what was in front of me, in a weird way, even though I was a little scared, if I'm honest, in a weird way, it was exhilarating, maybe a strong word, but I was like, game on. I see what's in front of me. I see what I need to do. Now I can make the decisions I need to make. For example, I'm telling you, you need to budget. And maybe you don't like that word. I sometimes call it something different, like a spending plan, financial freedom plan. Maybe that's more exciting. If you do that, and it's such common sense, but we don't follow it. If you do your spending plan and you determine that your gym is bringing in, just making up these numbers, bringing in $10,000, your expenses are $11,000. That's scary. I am spending $1,000 more than I'm making each month.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if we acknowledge that and don't address that? It doesn't fix it. It's like the client who's 100 pounds overweight, has high cholesterol, has high blood pressure, and they say, I don't want to look at it because it's too overwhelming. Well, that's not going to help. That's going to end in a bad way, just like this is. You got to find the motivation for yourself to make sure that you're looking at that. I said I would share four. That was three. I think that's good for now.
Okay. Well, I want to bring it back into. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what that fourth one was. I did have a fourth one before I started sharing that one. I mean, another one is paying your. Yep.
I think the one of the big points that you bring out, especially when it comes to profit margin, is when it comes to just looking at your finances in general, or looking at anything that might be a pain point, there's fear and anxiety that come with that, and it's very difficult to untie numbers from the emotional feeling that numbers give you, because we're taught that you're good or bad depending on how much money you make or how much money you don't make. You're good or bad depending on how much you save or how much things you have. So it's really difficult to disassociate that. I've run into the same thing when I'm coaching sales and I'm telling people, let's look at your numbers, look at your closing numbers, lead numbers. And we want to talk about leads that maybe don't count, or the reason this is low is because of X, Y, Z, as opposed to this doesn't make you a bad person. It's just data, and data inherently has no emotion whatsoever. But with that data, looking at that data and tackling that data, we can do something with it. We can take action on that data. And I think you're right. I think not looking at it is a big mistake. Either feeling like, oh, I'll just make more money, right? Never actually solve the base problem, in that way. I think that's powerful. But what I do want to do is I want to turn us back towards focusing on profit margins in general. And I want to get some quick fire ideas of, what is considered, I know it's different for everybody, but just some sort of general to aim for with what does a healthy profit margin look like? What is a healthy profit margin? What percentage should we be aiming for? And should that profit margin, what is the best way to divide that profit margin into, I don't know, let's say debt, or going towards new material, or paying yourself more, things like that.
Yeah, that's really good. I want to backtrack to the emotional side quickly. That is a good conversation. I know maybe we do another one of these. That is a good conversation because usually the problem is not the problem. That's kind of the phrase I've been saying. We think it's an issue with, I need to learn this tactic. Oftentimes it's something underneath, and looking into that, not to turn this into a therapy session, but that's important. It's important to address those, get curious about that. What's causing those negative emotions? And then at the end of the day, I love what you said about data is separate from emotions. Another point to add to that is one of the antidotes to fear is truth. For example, my child might be frightened over there's like a famous childhood book. I never read it, but it's about something about a monster in the closet, and the kid is frightened because they believe there's a monster in the closet. And the dad comes in and he says, there's no monster. Let's look. Let's open up the closet. I can show you there's no monster. And I think the premise of the book is each time they open it, he still sees the monster, but it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then by the end, there's like no monster. And of course, the moral of the story is when we actually look at it and we see the truth, then it's always worse than we think, or almost always worse than we think. So by looking at it, you're just dealing with that fear by truth. Okay, this is what we can do to improve our situation. As far as healthy profit margins, I'll say a few things. One is be careful not to compare yourself to others, because my fear in that is I say, hey, this is a good profit margin, and you might be doing really well, and maybe for some reason you're just not quite at that mark. That's okay. We want to make sure we give ourselves lots of grace. This might take a while. I'm not evading the question. I am going to share some specific numbers, but I just want to make sure I get that across. And here's the best answer I could give. It's not the answer that anybody wants to hear. A good profit margin is better than your current one. I like that approach, right?
Yeah.
What is, so like to your point, we want to understand this. We want to get a feel for this. So let's first determine that profit margin. Once you know what that is, we want to just do better. As far as exact numbers, yes, there are going to be some variances. I'll share a couple of them. One is going to be the size of your business. If I'm a one-man show, I'm doing all the training and everything else. What's the upside to that? The upside is, well, I may have less stress depending on how I'm running things. I am going to have greater profit margin because payroll is one of our largest expenses. And now that payroll is not there except for our own possibly. Therefore, the percentage of profit is going to be higher. What's the downside? We're limited in how much we can do. What do? We hire our first coach. Now our profit, depending on how much revenue we can bring in, the profit margin might shrink a little bit over time. And the reason I say that is because I want to be careful. I have no problem people dreaming big and they want to do these huge numbers. I have seen time and time and again where people have maybe impressive gross numbers. There's a saying that I heard one time. It was gross revenue feeds the ego, while profit feeds the family. We do want to pay attention to this and make sure that it's worth it for us. I've seen businesses where they didn't really feel like it was worth it. They developed this huge business, the profit margin shrunk because of the expenses going up dramatically. That's why it's important to pay attention to. The other factor is going to be, what are we including in that? We might look at an owner's pay, and that gets a little bit sticky depending on the structure of the business. With all that said, I like the idea of good, better, best. If you have all of your revenue coming in, you have all the expenses going out, and you're left with, let's say, 10%, I would say you got to be feeling pretty good about that. If you look at the averages, most gyms are not very profitable, unfortunately, especially if we're considering after the owner has paid themselves a reasonable salary. Let's call it better, will be 20%. And you're a super rock star if you're able to profit 30%, and that's after taking a reasonable salary, especially if there's in the work business being done. That's one of the distinctions you might make. You might say, what am I doing with all that profit? To answer your third piece of that, how are we breaking this down? I am for those who follow me and follow the content, I am, for the most part, debt averse. I want to clear my debt as soon as possible. If I have debt on my business, which I have had in the past, currently no debt. When I have that debt, I am aggressively paying it down with anything that's left over. With that said, and we can talk about some possible percentages, when I have a pile of cash, AKA profit for the sake, that's not what it means, but for the sake of this conversation, right? I have a pile of cash after that period. I'm going to divide it up, make some ratios. What I want to be careful of, this is where there are some differences with a business and personal households. With a business, you being able to make sales, drive revenue, ultimately drive profit is the golden goose. That's what's helping you pay yourself, to run the business. You want to do everything you can to keep that business healthy. That's my long-winded way of saying don't drain your business of all its cash. So yes, be aggressive with paying down your debt. However, allocate a percentage to growing your cash in your business. We also happened with COVID. I talked to my CPA, and every single one of the businesses that closed because of COVID was because they didn't have enough cash. I want to make sure we don't fall into that trap. That's a balancing act, because on one hand, you want to pay down that debt, especially if you're paying some significant interest on it. That's crippling your ability to do other things. We also want to not starve the business of cash. So this is a random example. This is the type of thing I help people work through. We might say we're going to throw 80% towards our debt. We're going to save 20% to stay healthy, keep cash on hand, be able to handle any unexpected events, possibly take care of some opportunities, possibly use it for growth at some point. Then the real fun begins when we're able to clear all that debt. And that might take a while. I told you how much debt I had. It does not happen overnight. You stay with it just like anything else, just like the client that's losing weight. You stay with it. Over time, it compounds. Before you know it, because time goes fast, as we all know, you're in a much better spot. Now you had 100% of the pie. 80% was going towards debt payoff. 20% you were saving for cash cushion. Now you have that 80% that was going to debt. Now, what do you do with that? That's where the fun begins. And that's where my approach would be more towards looking at some of those exciting things you want to do, whether that's growing the business, growing your personal wealth. I mean, there's all types of options, right? You can look to long-term retirement, fun,
That's
have a
really what
little
it
more
does,
fun.
right? Ultimately, getting to
Yeah.
that point of financial freedom is we hear financial freedom, but we don't associate it with our personal lives. As in, that gives me
Mm-hmm.
options. And then what would I do with those options? It's like you said, you're relating it to fitness, right? No one joins a gym because they want to burn muscle or burn fat and build muscle. They want what burning fat and building muscle will do for their lifestyle. Then financial freedom is exactly the same. If we can associate, what does this do for your lifestyle? You specifically, your lifestyle. What options do you want? That makes it much easier to wrap our head around. Okay, this is why I need to be brave. I need to look at the problem. I need to look at what it is that we need to tackle, and we need a healthy profit margin. So we have those options.
I love that you said that, Elias, because one of the qualities of financially successful people, this is based on research by Thomas Stanley. Many know him as the author of The Millionaire Next Door.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a sequel to that, which was called The Millionaire Mind, and he studied the attitudes and mindsets of people with tremendous net worths. This was going back to I think it was 1999, and they all had a minimum net worth of 10 million. So think about that, 25 years later. And one of the characteristics that was common among them was that they were long-term minded. And that's what you're talking about. It's connecting what I'm doing today to something that's way out there. And the people that struggle with that tend to not do as well. But if I could say, and that goes for business practices, what kind of clients am I trying to attract? Am I just trying to grab a quick dollar, which is short-term thinking? Or am I trying to attract clients that are a better fit, that I enjoy working with? And that goes for all types of decisions that we make. If we can look at how is this going to affect the long run, we're going to be much better off.
Billy, thank you so much for this time, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
That was like a half-hour dose of just like, hey, let's get financial healthy. That's a good like shot in the arm of let's go, and a financial adrenaline rush as it were. I'm looking forward to having you on again. But before I let you go, I want to know where, and we want to know, where can we find you? Obviously, you've not only know this stuff, but you've been through it. So I think it's easy for you having gone through this experience yourself and turned it around, for you to empathize with somebody who may be struggling in the same way. So if we want more of you and more of your content, where do we go?
I appreciate that because I do think that is a difference. I understand what it's like. I am one of you, right? I am a gym owner. I've been one, gosh, since 2010. Now that's about 15 years. So I understand the gym business and I had the personal issues that I talked about. And I love helping people improve their financial positions. I know what it can do. I know what can be done. Where can people find me? Let's keep it as simple as possible. You can find me on social media. It's Billy Hofacker. You can just shoot me a message. I'd love to connect there. Super casual. If you have any questions, I'd love to be able to help out, connect. The website is yourfitnessmoneycoach.com. I also have a podcast called Your Fitness Money Coach Podcast, where we talk about these types of principles. And that's also, like you talked about, shot in the arm. That's important. That's like a final takeaway for us is we all need that. I don't care who we are. I need it. We all need it.
Billy, thank you so much, man. I look forward to doing another one of these interviews with you. It's always great material. And for those of you watching, do reach out to Billy. He happens to be one of the most responsive, caring coaches I've ever spent time with. If you send him a message, he will absolutely respond. Thanks so much, Billy. We'll see you for the next one, man.
Thanks so much, brother.
Hey, thanks for tuning in, and share this video with someone who you think really deserves to have healthy profit margins. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you next week.